right, happy Monday evening as we kick off the next episode of Stronger Together Experience. And I'm thrilled to have our next guest in. But as we always start, one of the things I want to make sure to remind everybody that Stronger Together is not just about educators collaborating, it's collaborating with our partnerships. And I cannot thank Swivel and Bulb enough. Check them out down below is their website. Their partnership and their support allows you to hear from educators across the globe and hear their stories, their experiences to support you. So speaking of experiences and voices, I am extremely thrilled to welcome in my next guest who has been in education almost as long as me. I don't think as long as me because I'm probably older. And he'll say no, but who knows? We'll figure that out pretty soon. And I actually had the great opportunity to work in the same district and see him in action. It was incredibly impressive. I am thrilled right now to be writing a book called Disrupt the Status Quo. And he was one of the first educators I saw do that when he was in the third grade classroom, playing music, doing things his way. And that always impressed me. And really, besides having a friendship and living in the same town, I had an opportunity to see him work. And when X Factor launched, he was one of the first contacts I made to see if he would take all that experience and all of those ideas and publish a book. And he did. So we are going to talk today to our colleague, our author, all these great things, Jed Stefanowicz. Welcome in season 2 of Stronger Together.
Awesome. All right, we're already ahead of the game because Stefanowicz rhymes with Bananowitz. You never know how it's going to come out. But
there you go.
yeah.
Do many people use Bananowitz? Is that like a
once in a
common thing?
while? Once in a while. Thanks for the generous intro. It's nice to hear that.
Yeah.
And you might be a little older than me, but not much. We've both been teaching since the 1900s. I know that for sure.
There you go. There you go. So in those years of education, tell us your journey from, out of college into, when I met you, third grade teacher in Natick.
Yeah, I taught
beyond now.
Sure. My journey right out of school went into third grade in Natick, and it was awesome. I loved third grade. Someone told me it's the secret grade. Once you land there, you never want to leave. And for 20 years, absolutely.
Before I went into being a principal, that was my grade. I taught third grade for 11 years. So
it's fun. It's interesting. Right now, I'm a digital learning coach and spanning a lot of different grades, and you kind of find out where your wheelhouse is, where your comfort zone is, and kindergarten, I love going in, but I also love going out. So,
it's like the fun uncle, right? You can go in, get them riled up, sit in the little chairs, and I'm out.
Yeah. So I taught third grade for 20 plus years, and I loved it. And I was, as you said, I would do a lot of music, and I would like to do kind of things my own way. As my publisher, you realize even when it comes to writing a book, I kind of like to do things my own way. But most of all, I like to learn things my own way. And that's one of the lessons that I've learned is how I learn. And then kind of taking that and transferring that into how I teach. And I would always kind of look for myself in my class, and I kind of still do that. I look for myself out there. And I was using a lot of technology. Obviously in the 1900s, it was the earliest of early days. We did have dial-up. We did have my very first class. I think we had an Apple IIe or an LC2. Anyway, it might have been my personal one. But the beginning of those first Mac labs and the beginning of internet connectivity and connected classrooms, and then all the innovation labs. And I was using a lot of technology in different ways. My passion area is technology. It kind of always has been. And it's not just coding or computational thinking, but just kind of especially using technology in the gen ed curriculum. And that's always my push is practice over products. And you're going to hear me probably say that phrase a lot because it's a reminder for coaches. It's a reminder for classroom teachers when they're working with coaches, to really be mindful of the way that we're integrating technology. So here we are now. After third grade, I moved into helping develop this role of a digital learning coach in Natick, and I was across 5 elementaries. Now I'm in Walpole. This is my 4th year in Walpole, and I'm lucky enough to be in a district where every elementary has a full-time digital learning coach. So my job is supporting, it's an instructional coach position, a curriculum position that really supports the technology use in classrooms. So we all bring to it, our team brings to it kind of different passion areas, different specialty areas, and we do get to do coding activities, but our job primarily is to support the classroom instruction and talk about ways to integrate technology really effectively. And my secret is always to kind of find a veteran teacher and say, what is one of your home run lessons? Let's start there. What's a folder you've taken out for 20 years to teach? Because it's exactly what I did. And maybe it's just, it needs a refresher. So instead of representing something new coming into the classroom, I always like to think about, let's take a lesson that you know inside and out, and let's really kind of flesh that out.
Yeah. So I'm just going to back up a little bit. You packed a lot into
I know.
there, and for those who are tuning in or meeting you for the first time, and we use a ton of acronyms in our profession. They're all over the place. We use a lot of common speak that we think people know what they mean. And you said you're going to say this a lot: practice over product. What does that mean?
What that means is when I go to a conference, I try not to be mesmerized by whatever the new robot is. Or if a new product is delivered to the school, I can't walk into a classroom and say, "Oh, I've got this new robot I want to show you." Or it's really about looking, okay, how are we using technology to teach more effectively?
Right. Okay.
So it's not looking at the tool, it's looking at the teaching. And because that's what every classroom teacher wants to know. They don't want to hear about what the tool is, what the tool is. They want to know, okay, how is it going to enhance the instruction? What are you doing with the tool?
Yeah, and I think one of the things I often say to teachers if I'm doing any kind of professional development is, please, I'm begging you, do not start your lesson with, today I'm going to do X tool, and planning the lesson through Flipgrid or Grid Flip now or Wakelet or Insert tool. How do you go about working with teachers to shift that mindset away from, all right, today I'm going to teach them Google Docs. Today I'm going to use the robot and code. Like, how do you get them to shift that?
It's that exact intent, and it really is about being intentional and being mindful, so that instead of a teacher saying, "Oh, I want to do a green screen lesson," or kind of back up and say, "Well, what are you trying to do with it? What's the point?"
Right.
But if it's actually they're doing biographies and you want to insert them into, you know, Jonas Salk's laboratory, then
Right.
that's what you're trying to do. You're not teaching the green screen skill discreetly for that purpose. What you're really doing is trying to enhance that lesson. So that is, it's exactly what you said. It's not okay. It's Thursday at 2 o'clock. It's time for technology. Or
Right. It
Mr. S.
doesn't turn on and off.
Yeah, Mr. S is coming in on Wednesday. That we're not doing a green screen lesson or a BBOTS lesson. It's okay. It's during math time. We're actually talking about numerals. We're talking about computational thinking. We're talking about patterns. And then that is where I begin. What is the activity you're doing? What's the learning objective? And then we pick the tool that best services that. If you're starting with the tool, it's going to be either a one and done or it's just going to be a forgettable thing. And the teacher is likely to say, okay, can you come do that again next year?
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not in service of the teacher's growth. And Jean Tower from Needham, I ripped off a phrase that she uses all the time. And it's just a simple thing. It's stick to the ABCs, always building capacity. And if my job isn't in service of building a teacher's capacity, then my focus needs to be reshifted.
Yeah. And I think one of the things early on that I saw you do, you're saying ABCs, always build capacity. You started to take some of these ideas and create Jed Speaks, I think was the name of the blog. You started to share these ideas in building
Jed
capacity.
Talks.
Jed Talks.
In no way.
Tell us about that transformation.
Sure. Well, first of all, Jed Talks, I thought I was absolutely brilliant ripping off the TED Talks logo and making it
All
look
right, I'm
like
going to
Jed
stop you for a minute. You said this now twice. First, you said you stole from Gene Tower. Now, we don't do that in education. We edu-borrow. So
Oh,
we
yes.
edu-borrowed these.
Yes, I was inspired. I don't know if the attorneys for TED Talks would agree, but
True. You didn't sell that, though. You haven't marketed.
no. And I found out I'm not the only guy named Jed who decided to make something called Jed Talks, and they're not all educational. So that being said, I may switch the name down the line. But when it came to blogging, I wanted to collect my thinking, and I wanted to collect my thinking about different topics. And I really recommend for any teacher, whether they consider themselves a writer or not, it's not really what it was about for me. It was really a matter of, what do I think about blended learning? What do I think about flipped classrooms? What do I, and this is going back 5, 10 years. What do I think about, you name it, multiple intelligences, right? Or
Right.
what do I think about robots? And what it gave me a chance to do was kind of think about a cohesive thought that I could kind of put together, think about, articulate my thinking, beginning, middle, and end, and then be done with it. And it's almost like a chapter on the shelf. It was like it was out of my head, so that when I wanted to reference something,
Perfect.
okay, what, if someone contacts me about using drones in elementary, I can go grab that blog about drones, because that's my thinking about it. And I know it's much better put together there than it is if I just have a conversation or coffee with someone. So for me, it was part of it was a matter of just collecting those thoughts, archiving them, getting them out of my head. And that is ultimately what led to the idea to put some of that together in a book, and then, of course, adding a lot more to it. But the idea of the book and the idea of all of these chapters or blog posts is what I call Take Aim. And yes, it's another acronym. But the acronym is to activate, innovate, and motivate digital learning. And I differentiate digital learning from technology so that the focus is on learning, not the tool.
Yes. So, in case you missed that a second, here's the book "Take Aim at Digital Learning," and I think stemmed from your journey first with Jed Talks, and then putting this all together. And when you first started this project, how did you think this would support the field of education?
Well, what I really wanted to do was find a way to, all those things that I put on the shelf, like I said, I wanted to find a way to share them. First of all, I wanted to put them together in a way that made sense together for myself, but then also to be able to, the best compliment I got was from one of my colleagues, another digital learning coach, who kind of said, "You just wrote a manual for how to do our job."
Yeah, that was
And
awesome. That was a great one.
and that's what I really wanted it to be. I didn't want it to be loaded with jargon. I didn't want it to be 1,001 tech tips for the classroom. Although, if that's what someone's looking for, there are sections in there that are like, try this tomorrow, and there's specific recommendations. But I really wanted it to be, how is it that we're teaching and thinking differently about teaching and learning? And how does technology fit into that in a way that we're looking at the practice of teaching, and we're looking at the craft of teaching, right? We're 22 years into 21st century learning. We can't keep talking about those 4 C's of 21st century learning. In fact, with and now post COVID, there's a whole different set of C's that I like to talk about for, okay, where are we going now? And we feel it. I mean, we feel it in every school you've gone into the past year or the year before that, where teachers are saying, this is the hardest year yet. It's harder than remote. It's harder than hybrid. It's the hardest
Sure.
year of their 25 plus year career.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but there's a lot of educators as passionate as you are, as driven, who, when you talk about sharing your voice, the first thing they're going to say is, well, who wants to hear from me? And I know one of the first things you said when we kind of were talking about going down this road is like, who wants to listen to me? But the book has made an impact and is supporting teachers. What is your kind of message to others who maybe just want to write, a blog? Like, if you check out below, you can see Jed's blog and some of that work, or even take the next step into writing a book or speaking. And as someone who's just made that kind of shift, one, how did you start to gain that confidence to do it? And then what would you tell others?
It's kind of like, remember when you would have a student teacher, and whenever you would do a lesson, you would talk about it afterwards. It forced you to
Yeah.
be a little reflective of your own practice. And those of us who have been doing this for a while, you don't get reflective about your practice. You don't stop and think and explain what you do, how you do it, and why you do it. So
Right.
taking the time to do that, and it doesn't need to be in a book. It could be in a blog. It could just be offering something at a staff meeting. Talking to the principal and saying, I've got this idea, or I want to share something I saw, or can I collaborate with another teacher? Sometimes it's just that, but I joke that it's a million seller. I got a million of them done in my cellar, but publisher's favorite joke, right? But I do think that, the process of writing a book or a blog or doing workshops, it does help you find your voice. And then that voice gets amplified, and certain things resonate with some people, certain things don't. And you can never quite predict what's going to be a home run. You know, you've done workshops where tons of people standing room only, and then other times it might be crickets. And you know, you're not always the best evaluator of what's going to be that home run idea. So getting a lot of those ideas out there and finding lanes to share them. And part of that comes through meeting people and, you know, your power of connections and now stronger together. So many of the people I've met through X Factor and Codebreaker Publishing and the Innovators Group and all these different connections, you find people and you might be a guest on their podcast, or I've gotten to interview a whole bunch for my next project. But you know, you meet these people and you realize, yeah, they are really interested in not just your message, but your experience and your take on something they might be challenged with too. You know, a principal that we both have know in common down in Jersey had a new hired digital learning coach and realized his maybe staff wasn't as receptive to the idea as one would expect. So he reached out and just kind of was looking for some advice to how to support that staff person. And it's all those connections. Who are you connecting with to either empathize about what's going on with, you know, a curriculum topic or a new, and it might be a new robot, but it also might just be, all right, what are we doing about going hybrid? Like we all had to learn immediately how to become full one-to-one districts in a way that we weren't prepared for. And I don't know who had the quote, but that idea that we were all in the same boat. Well, we weren't in the same boat, right? We were all in the same storm. And we were all in very different boats in the sense of preparedness, interest, experience, skill. So suddenly, people who had avoided working with digital learning coaches or tech integration specialists, we were suddenly really popular because we had to
Right.
find solutions. Everyone had to find solutions. You know, it was in the sense we were all in that same storm trying to find something new. And now we're all back in a new storm, coming back and trying to pick up the pieces. So when I talk about those next four C's, to go back to that for a second, you know, the original four C's we talked about are um, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity. And a lot of times that just becomes a spaghetti tower or a popsicle stick bridge, and it becomes a
Right.
one-off STEM challenge. So what I'm advocating for is this whole new look at four C's, where the new four C's are compassion, connection. Hold on, I wrote them down here so I don't forget. Compassion, connection, culture, and climate. And I know you've done some talking about the difference between culture and climate. And that's where our buildings are really, I think, struggling the most. And I think that's where educators and administrators and students and families are struggling, is like rebuilding that culture.
Yeah.
And climate doesn't necessarily build culture. Climate's great and it makes us feel good, but a lot of that culture has been eroded. And I know they're looking at really what are the long-term impacts and the influence of COVID affected years, and how are we rebuilding that? And I think what's really lost, and we're really able to put our finger on it maybe for the first time, is that student agency.
Yeah.
So
Critical.
yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things before we jump into your next kind of project, because you kind of laid the foundation for that. But one of the things I've always been impressed with things that you do and are doing, and especially within your writing, because I know we've had a lot of communication about very specific things that you wanted in there, is that in today's edu celebrity sense, where people want followers, people want likes and retweets, and sometimes they bend to the norm, you've been considerably authentic from the day I met you throughout. Like you are about, this is what's important to me. This is what I want it to look like, and this is how I'm going to present it. How do you stay authentic when you are also now a brand and try, selling books and doing workshops? How do you keep that balance of being authentic but yet getting your message out there?
Um, that's a really good question because I'm not good at building a brand, as you know. It's not my cup of tea, because I think, you know, especially people who have moved out of the classroom and are doing full-time keynotes and traveling, that's their gig, that's their hustle, and that's their livelihood. And, you know, that level of promotion is not something that I want to do or aspire to do. So it probably doesn't help me build that brand work because I'm not naturally a self promoter in that way. It almost makes me a little uncomfortable. But at the same time, I think the byproduct of that is it hopefully builds or holds on to a little credibility. Because even though I'm not in the classroom anymore, I'm in classrooms every day and I'm with kids every day. So if I'm giving a workshop for administrators or I'm, you doing an interview like this, I'll say, you realize tomorrow morning at 8:45, I'm going to be, crawling in a rug with first graders doing BBOTs or whatever. And if you're talking to teachers and you haven't been part of the COVID experience and you can't talk about what the actual context is right now, it's you lose something. And then if in that same conversation it feels like you're trying to promote yourself, a book, or a product, it loses something and it puts a rotten taste sometimes in people's mouth. So I've just tried to be myself and I've tried to, nurture those relationships and always keep it about kids, always keep it about building teacher capacity. And it's just what I love to do, right? I try to model being a lead learner. Kids know what I'm most excited about. If last year I really got really interested. My colleagues started podcasting, and I was like, all right, now I get it. I'm on board. And I tried podcasting in a bunch of different classrooms with classes and getting their teachers to be the hosts. And they felt my excitement. And that's always been my passion area is if there's something I'm really interested in, passionate, curious, I want to model that because that's contagious. And what happens, I think, is you get some of the voices in the classes that you don't normally hear. And that's when I get most excited is when, you see those or hear those voices that maybe don't have the lane, aren't always amplified. And like I said, I'm looking for myself out there as an 8 or 9-year-old to give that spotlight, give that microphone, give them that chance to shine. And whether it's through a green screen or hosting a podcast or doing a magic trick or playing the recorder for the class or whatever it is,
Nice. And so for someone who about a year ago was like, I'm not sure anyone wants to read anything that I'm going to write or having some self-doubts, within a very short period of time after your book came out, you're like, all right, I have another project. So that quickly changed from seeing, I think, the impact that you can have on so many people in so many ways. And you're like, all right, here's another idea. So first of all, I was excited that you had a positive experience to want to come back. And two, I really love the idea. So I'd love for you to share it, kind of like announcement time.
Sure. Yeah.
Like Jed's next project is.
Next project coming this fall. And it's, it's funny. It's the difference between the author writing the book and the classroom teacher, right? This is kind of like getting the printed copy is kind of the finish line. And a publisher is like, no. That's not, that's the beginning of something.
Yeah.
And it's just such a different way of thinking, right? And like I said, I don't aspire to be an edu celebrity. And the idea that when this came out, yes, the crowd went mild. So that, but that's okay. It's like, it's there, it exists. And like you said recently, it's not going anywhere. And I love talking about it. And I love talking about it really organically and naturally and recommending it. And if a school wants to grab, 3 copies for their staff room, or a digital learning coach team wants to get it for their team, or a principal wants to buy a set for their school, that's awesome. So like I said, this was a lot about kind of my own thoughts, my own ideas, my own recommendations. So my next project went totally the different direction. I really wanted to do an examination of people I admire, people whose leadership I think is really making what I call a shift from impact to influence. So the title of the book is Impact to Influence.
Nice.
And it's everything. There's a handful of people from the Codebreaker X Factor ecosystem. There's 3 different Teachers of the Year, including the National Teacher of the Year a few years ago. There's authors, illustrators. Peter and Paul Reynolds are involved. England's most prominent bonsai artist has been interviewed. But what I really wanted to do was capture their stories and hear from them how they went from impacting a small group of people, maybe one class of second graders, to deciding they wanted to be an administrator, wanted to go a different direction, wanted to leave the classroom, thought about publishing, went into different tracks. So it's this idea of moving from impacting a small group to influencing a large group. And the structure is pretty unique. And time will tell if it's a brilliant idea or not. But everyone I've mentioned it to is like, that's kind of cool. So the structure of the book is, you read 3 or 4 pages about Peter Chan, and you're like, who's Peter Chan? So you read what I call a pathway profile of his pathway, and then there's a QR code. And you hold up your phone, and up comes a 20-minute Zoom interview between me and each person. So it's like an embedded podcast. And I didn't want to do long podcasts. I feel like there are a lot of podcasts, and I really wanted to kind of have it all embedded in a book so that, if you're at the beach, you read about Matt Joseph, you look at your phone, and you get to hear a conversation with the person right out of their own voice. So time will tell if it's a good idea or not. I just know it's a project I would love to read. And finding these people has been really interesting. And it's almost like, I guess I should have thought about it as a dissertation, or trying to maybe formalize it in some way. Because what I was really trying to capture was, what are some of the common themes? What are some of the takeaways that all of these really impressive people have in common? Whether it's people along the way who they met and admired, or people along the way who were roadblocks, and how did they deal with those circumstances? So it's a really cool collection of conversations, and I can't wait for each of these subjects, these featured guests, to kind of hear each other's conversations too. And it's a matter, like Peter Reynolds would say, and his brother Paul, of connecting those dots. And it goes right along with your Stronger Together and the power of connections, because all that is probably the biggest through line with all of these stories is people they met along the way. People who either gave them opportunities, people who challenged them, people who encouraged them, and maybe some people who stood in their way. But so it's called Impact Influence, and I can't wait to share it. It's really just a way of sharing other people's stories and successes.
Yeah, and when you pitched it to me or just talked about it, it really struck a chord, because that's what I got into this new lane of education, is amplifying others' voices. As you said, I wrote Power Connections and Stronger Together, all within the theme of that I like to work with the collaboration theme. So, and I love to get inspired by individuals. I love to learn from you. I love to learn from people, because I know at the end of the day, that collective wisdom is going to make me better. I'm not that kind of person who thinks they have the answers. By God, I've had 4 books edited, and I've had the best editors, thankfully, because that has helped me tremendously. So I appreciate that. Like I said, if you haven't had a chance to connect with Jed, here is his Twitter handle. Follow him on Twitter. You're going to see his blog on there. His book is on there. But I also want to ask you one more question, because I wrap up every interview asking each guest, what does Stronger Together mean to you?
Stronger Together, to me, you didn't preview that question.
No, I never do that.
Well, I think, and hopefully teachers realize it earlier in their career. I was lucky enough in Natick to be part of a team. We were together for 20 years. You remember my 3rd grade team.
Yeah.
And we were, and that's where I learned how to become a teacher. And it's got to be really difficult right now, or the past 5 years, to be a new teacher and to feel like there's an expectation on you to do it all. I always talk about this unfair expectation, especially as people, they're called digital natives, right? Somehow that they should be expected to be really skilled teachers. Why would they have that expectation? So you have maybe a whole generation of younger teachers who are, sure, maybe they're more, their capacity with technology is more so than some of their peers, but I think it ends up intimidating some more veteran teachers. And then veteran teachers, there isn't a natural connection. So part of my role is not coaching what I think teachers to do. Part of my role is facilitating conversations between a new teacher and a veteran teacher, because those are your secret weapons in the building. Someone who knows that curriculum inside and out, someone who can work with a new teacher and mentor them in exactly what they need to do to become a really proficient teacher.
Awesome. Well, we are thrilled to have you on. Another great conversation and the Stronger Together experience. You're back to work 8:30 tomorrow with those kindergartners doing the B-bots and robots. And once the Innovators Lounge opens back up, we'll see you back in there and sharing. And we look forward to your new project. And when that drops, we'll have you come back on and dive a little bit deeper into that. So Jed, thank you so much for coming on. And for all of our viewers, make sure to check Jed out. Thank you to Bulb and Swivel. Check them out. And of course, as Jed put it, the Codebreaker and X Factor ecosystem where we're continuing to work together. And for me, I want to make sure tomorrow as you head back to schools that you continue to collaborate and you're always putting we over me.